What would you say to a couple or a woman or a man who every time she brings up a situation that is a situation maybe about the kids or the household or just a topic, not necessarily directed at him as a person, but like we have this problem, and then he makes it about him every time. I know that can be a really big cycle.
I think we need to look at why that happens, Anna. You know, like before we say, here's what you should do, I think we like really need to look at what is that trigger and why is that happening? So for men, we have been conditioned our whole lives that emotions aren't safe, that emotions are something to be dealt with and ended. In fact, there's not a man I've talked to that hasn't heard like you need to man up and stop crying and, you know, you're getting too emotional, you're making everybody else uncomfortable. And so our conditioning is, hey, if emotions are present, it's something to fix right now. And in my relationship, unfortunately, for the lion's share of the 22-year relationship I had with my wife, I did one of four things. If emotions were present, I try and fix it. And fixing for me looked like, hey, Katie, you don't need to be feeling like this right now. And there's no reason for you to have this emotion. And let me show you all the logical reasons why you're wrong, which I didn't know at the time, but is completely invalidating. And she didn't feel seen. She just felt invalidated. That was like the best thing I did. The second thing I would do is try and build process around it. It's like, oh, this is coming up again. Well, it's never going to happen again. I'm going to like make sure that we back up and figure out why it happened. And then this just doesn't come up. And as soon as you start building process around a person, you turn them into a project. That's like as invalidating as a person can get, as invalidated as a person can get. And then it got worse. You know, the other thing that I would do is withdraw. If I walked into the room and emotions were present, and I didn't understand why. It's like, I can't believe this is happening again. Like, not now. Like, why? This isn't fair. And I had all these emotions and all of these triggers and all this conditioning and wounding that I didn't know was from my childhood. You know, that was like a very young part of me saying like, hey, you can't do this. This isn't fair. This isn't safe. I don't feel safe, you know? And then the fourth thing I would do is if emotions were present, I would match them. And once you start matching and escalating, what happens is her nervous system is feeling it far more violently than yours. And often I would exceed the emotional presence that she had and escalate beyond where she was, which at that point, she's probably not even hearing what I'm saying. Her body's just registering, I am under threat. And I think men need to understand that all four of those strategies that so many of us have been programmed to use are strategies you can untrain. And you can learn that when emotions are present, a lot of times your wife just needs your presence. And, you know, masculine containment is the ability to stay in a situation and transmute the emotions that are going on, not suppress. Suppression is really dangerous, and not explode. Exploding is just as bad, but to breathe and feel the things that are coming up and admit to yourself that it's okay. And you know, Anna, one of the things that I ask all the men that I work with, anybody who joins the Brotherhood has to go through an interview. And one of I ask three questions. The first one is your wife stronger than you? They all say no. I say, is your wife more physically capable than you? And they all say no. And then I ask like a really pivotal question. Is your wife more capable of violence than you? And they all say no. Last week I had a guy he said, my wife's a police officer. And I said, okay, so the two of you go into a room and it's life or death, who's walking out? And he's like, no, you're right, it's me. So like, even in the case where you have somebody who's trained in hand-to-hand combat, like this is always true. And so I think one of the things that men need to understand is that when emotions are present and we react as though there's a real threat, even though there isn't one by the questions that I just asked, like there's no physical threat to you whatsoever. And so if you're reacting like there is a threat, that is a reaction that comes from another time. That's a reaction that comes from wounding or trauma or something else. And that's your work. You know, that's your work to be able to be in that trigger and say, hey, there's nothing that is actually unsafe right now. I can stay. And, you know, we have a 8-week container. It usually is delivered over 10 or 11 weeks. And in that time, by understanding the trigger and by doing some somatic exercises and really training around that like a martial art, we have men that are able to step into containment and start providing emotional security and safety. And the results are extraordinary on the other side.